Good evening and welcome to the the October 23 expanded form-based code area working group meeting. My name is Daniel Weir. I am the meeting chair. We're holding a virtual public meeting tonight, and all participants are joining us remotely. I'd like to begin by orienting everyone to our virtual environment and cover a few specifics about how the meeting will be run. Tonight's meeting is available to join from the FBC AWG webpage, the county's events calendar, and at the top of the agenda. Additionally, there's a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use it. And for the record, I believe that we have two people who are called in right now by phone. If anyone loses internet connectivity during tonight's meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. Please keep your video turned off and microphone muted until you're called upon, turning off sound to all of the devices as well around you to minimize interference. These tools are located on your icons as icons on your toolbar, and if you do not see this toolbar, try tapping or clicking on the center of your screen and it will pop up. When called upon to speak, you must unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon that is located on your meeting command bar. The moderator does not have the ability to unmute you. If you're dialing in by phone, please press *6 to unmute. When you're finished speaking, please remute your microphone. The meeting chat is active for participants who need technical assistance only and should not be used for discussion, for public comment, questions about agenda items, or requests for more information. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public testimony period. If an AWG member or a meeting member wishes to be recognized to speak on an item, I ask that you both raise your hand and turn on your video feed, leaving your microphone muted. I'll use both the video feeds and the hands as an indicator of who would like to speak. I especially rely on the hands because it tells me who has raised their hand first. Once you've been recognized, you can then unmute. And once you've completed speaking, please turn your video feed back off. I know that we have two meeting committee members tonight who have joined us by phone. I'm going to ask both of you to press *6 now to mute yourself. In your case, I will both try to affirmatively check in with you, but also I will be looking at your mute and unmute status. Once you've pressed *6, it will indicate to me that you've muted. Thank you to the 571 caller. And when I see that you've come off of mute, I'm going to take that as the same as if you were to have raised your hand or turned on video. I'm still going to try to affirmatively check in if I don't hear with you, but the best indication I have that you'd like to speak will be that I will see that you have gone off mute when you press *6. For public speakers, if we have any, you'll be called on to speak at the end of the meeting and you'll be muted when your time is concluded. And finally, this is a public forum. Tonight's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website. And a reminder that all information associated with tonight's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. That being all said, I'm going to go to Ms. Sante to kick us off on the substance of tonight's meeting.
Thank you very much. Give me 1 second. I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right, hopefully everybody can see the slides that are up. So we wanted to kick things off by thanking everybody again for your participation earlier this year in the Barcroft land use analysis process, which did lead to county board action on a number of items. So we just wanted to quickly recap what those items were. In July, the county board adopted updates to 2 of the Columbia Pike visioning documents. They also advertised updates to the general land use plan and the master transportation plan, and approved the master financing and development plan. And then in the background, we've also continued to review and take renovation use permits to the county board. And we do now have our first new construction application submitted for the Barcroft Apartments property. So since approval of the MFDP and the updates to those visioning documents in July, the county and the Jared Lynch team have been working together to reflect these updates in the form-based codes, including changes to the Barcroft Apartments, land uses, building heights, roadway alignment, street cross sections, the orientation of public spaces, preservation areas, and other associated development regulations. So with these next couple AWG meetings, we'll be talking to you about those different elements and how they're captured. They largely fall into three different buckets, which include updates to the regulating plan maps, which show buildable areas, public spaces, uses, and those building heights. The second bucket are those street cross-section diagrams, which we'll largely be focusing on this evening. And then the third bucket are the regulatory text changes that address additional and kind of more specific standards. So just as a reminder, we have gathered you all again. You represent quite a variety of different groups that are important to this conversation. So we do have in attendance our core Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group membership, including the 10 civic associations and the Columbia Pike Partnership, key commissions and committees, community organizations, and then we do have a number of staff from different departments on hand to help answer any questions. So as a refresher, you probably saw this outlined in the emails that you received, but this evening we're going to focus on the street cross sections and the framework of text changes that will be taking to the board early next year. And then at the following meeting in November, we'll be revisiting the regulating plan, doing any kind of follow-up needed on the cross-section conversation, and then doing a little bit deeper dive into some of those regulatory text changes. These meetings will continue to be virtual. They're both held on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. We will continue to record these meetings and post materials in advance. So a quick recap of the schedule from today moving forward. We're here this evening with the first of two meetings with the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group to review these proposed form-based code amendments. Again, that second meeting will be held on November 13th. Following those meetings, we will take the proposed amendments to the zoning committee in December. And then in December, we will also be bringing to the AWG the first new construction use permit. In January, we'll continue with different commission and committee briefings for all of the amendments, including which will focus on the request to advertise for those amendments. And then we plan to bring all of these items, including the new construction application, to the county board in February. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Matt Matuzik to cover the framework for the text changes.
Thanks, Olivia, and good evening, everyone. What I wanted to do over the next few slides is, at a high level, set the stage for some of the amendments and changes that we have prepared over the summer and that you're going to be seeing more and more information about, just to get you more familiar and allow us to maybe refine them further as we begin to get feedback and reactions. As Olivia was mentioning earlier, a lot of what you're going to see, tonight and next month's meeting are map changes, exhibit changes, cross-section changes, but there's also going to be a significant element that involves kind of the narrative aspect of the form-based code and its many text requirements. So what we've done is really took a look back at the last 18 months of work and considered all the things that we reviewed with the Master Financing and Development Plan, and which kind of concluded in July, but also going back into 2023, and any kind of lessons learned involving the renovation use permits, of which I think we have 4 now behind us with county board approval. And as we've done that, we've looked at certain parts of the neighborhood's form-based code, which we believe may benefit from either additional clarity some further adjustments, and maybe introducing new elements that we think through Barcroft's examples either can benefit this property and its limits, but in some cases, as you'll see in this spreadsheet, benefit the entire corridor. So I'm not going to go through each one of these, but as you'll see there's some process changes, particularly in areas where we may have public open spaces, and we want to make sure some of that engagement begins sooner. So by the time we get to the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group meeting, we've already had some feedback collected, and the design was able to kind of progress a little bit further, as has the development project that triggered its review. So things like that, as well as the ability to modify 2 additional elements, primarily involving loading and parking, which we believe on some sites, particularly ones that frame multiple streets, could really benefit from some additional flexibility. So that's something we believe many sites could take advantage of, while still allowing us to deliver the expected built environment that the form-based code always envisioned. So there's things like that, as well as looking at additional definitions for things like preserved areas, where I think during the discussion of the various elements that live in Barcroft, we think that further clarifying what we consider as a natural area is appropriate. Definitely just made sense, and it could easily be applied to the few other instances where you see that throughout the corridor. And then also being mindful of Part 7 of the code, which speaks to those conservation areas and how to renovate and build around them. And what have we learned as we started to work with Virginia Housing and pursuing tax credits. So a lot of very technical behind the scenes type of analysis, but one that we do need to document and formally change in the code. So for tonight, these are not going to be the center of attention, but we did want to start with at least a framework. So when we return in 3 weeks, you'll start to see the exact text changes in a draft format that will resemble these 4 key categories. So we're just kind of using this as a placeholder to get everybody ready. Beyond the text changes, if we go to the next slide, I did want to introduce the next remaining segment of the presentation, which gets to the cross sections. And the reason we started with these tonight is because until we get to a good place and some consensus on what they are, they will start to hold up everything else that we do need to present to you, particularly in terms of the regulating plan maps that delineate where buildings can be located and where public streets need to take over. So that very distinct balance, which does vary depending on where you are in Barcroft, is very important. We want to make sure we nail that down and address any kind of comments we receive before we come back in November with those regulating plan maps that build upon where we have landed on the cross sections. So this slide takes us back to July, where we most recently spoke to the street network that now needs to incorporate the 12th Street Bike Boulevard and also address and be compatible with some of the multimodal improvements that have either occurred or been approved for Columbia Pike and George Mason. So there's also obviously some evolved thinking from the Jai Lynch side of the equation as the new owner and where they think development needs to happen. In response to that, this is where the future streets have been readjusted. And of course, allowing us to bring in the northwest corner of the property so that it's no longer in the commercial code, but now speaks the same language as the neighborhood's form-based code. So these maps are going to continue to show up in tonight's meeting because it's really important to return to why different cross sections are being proposed and where they are located throughout the site. So we just wanted to provide that refresher, both from a transportation and vehicular circulation, but also from bicycle circulation perspective. The next slide gets into the reason why we are not conveniently, perhaps, returning to those 3 or 4 prototypical cross sections that already live in the form-based code, but instead need to develop new cross sections that are unique just to Barcroft. The 4 elements and criteria that you see on the screen here really represent the combination of reasons why that need exists for Barcroft and why we couldn't just plug and play some of the existing cross sections you might be familiar with and have applied in other sites that have developed using this form-based code. So because of this combination of factors, whether it's the multimodal element and addressing the bike facilities that need to be on 12th Road or fire access, or the fact that we're dealing with partially preserved and partially redeveloped areas, all those things really make it difficult to simply rely on what's already in the code. We have done our best working with John Lynch to limit how many new cross sections we have. But as you'll see, there's so much unique elements to Barcroft that it's still a significant list and one that I think will garner a lot of conversation tonight. So with that, I'm going to pass things over to Robert Gibson from DES to further discuss and introduce the cross sections before John Lynch walks you through the individual ones.
Matt, thank you. So we've been working on the cross sections even while the MFDP was under discussion. So we had an opportunity to take into consideration a lot of the comments that were coming out of that discussion, and we hope that what you see today is a thoughtful response, a thoughtful and holistic response to the comments that were presented earlier. As Matt identified, we've put together 7 new cross sections, typical sections for use within the Barcroft planning area. These include 2 sections along 12th Road, one from George Mason Drive to South Thomas Street. Then we have another one from South Thomas to South Wakefield. We also have a internal cross section for 12th Road east of George Mason Drive, and that cross section will also apply to the new Taylor Street between Columbia Pike and 12th Road. And then we have 4 cross sections for the external streets in Barcroft. The first being Columbia Pike cross sections. The second one are new cross sections for George Mason Drive. These cross sections include consideration for the county's recommendation for multimodal trails on the east side of the roadway, and then also incorporate proposed redevelopment conditions on the west side. And then we also have proposed sections for 4 Mile Run Drive Minor along the new development frontages. We have 2 cross sections for 4 Mile Run Drive Minor. One that is along the segment between South Thomas and South Wakefield. This segment was not identified as a principal bike connection, so it does not include bike facilities specifically. And then another section between South Wakefield and access to the WO&D trail. And this section does include protected bike facilities. Mike Pinkowski is going to walk you through the individual cross sections, but I'm going to talk about some of the overarching things that you'll see in commonality throughout this plan. And this summary here provides sort of a quick reference for what's going on within the cross sections if you get lost as Mike is talking. For those internal streets, we're recommending all sidewalks provide a minimum clear sidewalk of 6 feet. On the exterior streets, a minimum of 8 feet of clear sidewalk. All of the sections include tree planting zones. Those are generally ranging between 6 and 7 feet, so larger than sort of our historic 4 and 5 foot tree planting areas. Additionally, on-street parking was considered within the sections. And then a number of the sections specifically support bicycle facilities that are not otherwise incorporated into the sections for the neighborhood's form-based code. We have used a standard 6-foot bike lane for when bike lanes are separated and provide one direction of flow. And then we have two different sections for shared use trails or cycle tracks. Along George Mason Drive, the county's plan proposes a 12-foot shared use trail on the east side. And then for that segment on 4 Mile Run Drive Minor that will connect bike facilities from Wakefield to the WOND, we're proposing a 10-foot wide cycle track. That cycle track is also buffered from the travel lanes, as you'll see in this. We have a range of travel lanes sizes that you'll see. The reason for this is because we're really considerate of fire requirements. Fire requires two principal things when we're looking at street cross sections and aerial access to buildings. The first is that they need a minimum of a 26-foot wide clear space. And that presents a bit of a challenge when we have streets with a single travel lane in each direction, because typically we'd want those travel lanes to be narrower. In this case, what we've done is added having a travel lane and a small buffered median to equal that 26 feet. And then additionally, we have a few segments that have turn lanes and other buffers to support bike lanes and other things that you'll see on a case-by-case basis. The streetscape widths do all vary. They vary from 17 feet to 23 feet. And then they all have a building zone or a shy zone between the back of sidewalk and the proposed building frontages. Those are typically 4 feet, but they can be smaller, as small as 2 feet and as wide as 6 feet. So these sections help to support on-street parking, pickup and drop off for the new buildings. And they all will contribute to the goals of the MFDP and our master transportation plan. Additional bike facilities are provided. You'll see particularly in the cross sections for 12th Road between George Mason and South Thomas Street, more of a focus on biophilia and opportunities for additional plantings. And so with all of that, we came up with the proposed cross sections we'll talk about in detail. Before we talk about those cross sections in detail, we wanted to just briefly discuss the bike network that is proposed through the site. And so here we go. The bike network is proposed to have 3 typical segments. The first is a sort of biophilic bike, protected bike facility along 12th between George Mason and Thomas. This provides a sidewalk grade protected buffered bike lane with street trees on one side and additional planting on the curb side. And then as we move west, the sections that we're proposing for 12th Street between Thomas and Wakefield include dedicated on-street bike lanes. Along South Wakefield, they also include dedicated on-street bike lanes. And then as we make that final connection, or the first connection, depending on which direction you're going, from the WOND to the bike facilities on Wakefield, we're proposing a bi-directional cycle track that has a buffer along between the cars. It's important to note that the reason that we chose these facilities was principally guided by the county's adopted goal of providing all ages, all access facility types based on the roadway types and projected volumes for those roadways. All of these cross sections meet that goal. In addition, we did look at different ways to support those goals, but we also factored in how fire access could be provided. And there are different considerations that we can go into on a case-by-case basis on how we looked at these facilities. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it off to Kathy Puskar to speak, and then Mike Pinkowski to go through the cross sections. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Good evening, everyone. Kathy Puskar with Walsh Colucci, and I just wanted to say hello on behalf of Jair Lynch. We're really happy to be at this part of the process where we are implementing or getting ready to implement plans. And I think this next step of the detailed revisions to the plans will get us one step closer to actual development applications and construction. I'm going to turn it over to Mike Pinkowski to go through the individual cross sections associated with the streets, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you all may have, and look forward to our next meetings where we get into the specific changes and move forward to the public hearings. So thanks for that.
Hello, everybody. Mike Pinkowski. Happy to be here tonight. And as everybody said, truly a collaborative effort to get where we are today. So I'll be walking you through the 7 individual sections that Rod kind of teed up for me here. So the first section is section 1. It's 12th Road in Wakefield, 12th Road west of Thomas. Here, we're looking at a 48-foot cross section, curb to curb, with 1 lane of travel in each direction, 6-foot on-street bike lanes, and 7-foot parking lanes. And adjacent to new development, there'll be a 6-foot tree pit, 6-foot sidewalk, and 4-foot building zone. There is a unique section, I guess, on the east side of Thomas, or on 12th Road, just west of Thomas, where we will be kind of sneaking the road through some conservation area that will remain, but there will be bike lanes on both of these facilities. The current master transportation plan actually does not call for bike lanes on Wakefield, so that will be a new addition to the master transportation plan. Next section, please. So this is section 2. This is kind of the main section of 12th Road between Thomas Street and George Mason. As Rob mentioned, this is really our biophilic bikeway, which we've been calling it. It includes 11-foot travel lanes with the 4-foot bike buffer to accommodate fire access, as Rob noted. It will have on-street parking, 2-foot buffer, and then we'll have a 6-foot bikeway, 6-foot tree pit, 6-foot clear sidewalk, and then a 2-foot door yard, with additional opportunity for a 4 to 6-foot door yard at the ground floor, where the new development occurs. Next section, please. Section 3 is 12th Road east of George Mason and the new Taylor Street connection from Columbia Pike down to 12th Road. This section will include 12-foot travel lanes and a parking / tree zone. So it's similar to an existing section in the neighborhoods code where there's 2 parking spaces, 2 trees, 2 parking spaces. So that will alternate down Taylor and this section of 12th Road. And then again, 6-foot clear sidewalk and a 4-foot building zone. Next section, please. So Columbia Pike, I'm going to be talking about 2 sections, but in general, and consistent along Columbia Pike will be either an 11-foot median or turn lane, 2 travel lanes, and on-street parking. The right side of the screen shows you the Barcroft frontage, and where there will be residential on the ground floor within the MFDP limits. We'll have a 6-foot tree zone, an 8-foot sidewalk, and a 6-foot building zone, in addition to the on-street parking. So from face of curb to face of building, it would be 21 feet. As an alternate, section 4, if you go to the next slide, this is oh, okay. So we're moving on to George Mason here. So George Mason, adjacent to new development on both sides, will have 2 travel lanes, 7-foot parking lane, 6-foot tree zone, 8-foot sidewalk, and a 4-foot building zone. That would be on the west side of George Mason, that frontage. That's on the right side. So this section is taken as if you were looking from Columbia Pike down George Mason. Adjacent to the west side development, as Robin mentioned, the county is planning the 12-foot trail, shared use trail. So that section on the east side of George Mason would be a 6-foot tree zone, 12-foot shared use path, and a 4-foot building zone. As Rob noted, at Columbia Pike, as the individual applications come in, we'll be evaluating whether or not there's a need for a turn lane at Columbia Pike. Next section, please. So this is the 4-mile road section, minor, north or west of Wakefield Street. And this will provide a connection from the Wakefield bike lanes. It'll be on the O&D side, which is the southwest side of 4-mile run. There'll be a 2-way bike facility with 4-foot buffer. Again, 11-foot travel lanes, and adjacent to the new redevelopment, there'll be a 7-foot parking lane. And then along the new development, there'll be a 6-foot buffer, 8-foot clear sidewalk, and a 4-foot building zone. And then the final section is very similar to the last, except on the W&OD side. So southeast of the Wakefield connection, there'll be on-street parking. And again, we need to accommodate 26-foot clear for fire, so the travel lanes will be a little bit wider, but the same streetscape adjacent to new development, 6-foot tree zone, 8-foot clear sidewalk, 4-foot building zone. So as Kathy mentioned, we're happy to answer any questions that the group has. Thank you.
I think then that we will start with questions that come up, unless Ms. Sontag, there's anything that you want us to go over first.
No, I think that covers everything. And yeah, we can start with questions.
Great.
I'm happy to bring slides back up as needed.
Sure. Mr. Hanna, we're going to start with you. Then we're going to go with the caller from the 571 area code. You'll please forgive me for now for not recalling which caller is which, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, thanks. Several questions, concerns. So first of all, 12th between Thomas and Wakefield. And I think we raised this concern in our letter last spring. Have you guys looked at the slope of that? I don't think it's going to be usable as a safe bike route, not by most riders, if it's as steep as I think it will be based on the roads that are near there now. Now, I'm assuming that you're doing the unprotected bike lanes because you need the fire width, because otherwise I think the county has really started steering away from unprotected bike lanes as not feeling safe or comfortable for many riders. So first of all, can you confirm that that's the reason why you're not protecting those bike lanes? And then the second thing is the slope. And I guess my concern is if it's as steep as I think it's going to be, people aren't going to use it. You're putting a great facility on 12th Road, east of there, but it kind of goes to nowhere. And I think what folks are going to do is they're going to turn left on Thomas and just take Thomas all the way down, in which case we need to accommodate that, which is a whole different matter. But could you answer those first two questions? Steepness of 12th Street, and then is it a fire issue that's keeping us from protecting the bike lanes?
So the first part is I think that there will be some, it's going to be above 5% grade. What sections have more than that, I can't speak to yet. I mean, part of this is that this is going to be a new road that is cut in, and that leads into part of the answer for the on-street bike lanes. We do run into a considerable pinch point between the existing buildings just west of Thomas Street. And we were trying to figure out how or what type of facilities to get through this area for bikes. And we think that the on-street bike lanes provide us the most flexibility to get through that pinch point and then widen out as we get closer to Wakefield.
And then let me follow up, Rob. I will say that Thomas, as it approaches South Formel Run, its grade is actually significantly steeper than any of the grade between 12th between South Thomas and South Wakefield. It's bad as South Thomas approaches South Formel Run Drive. So it's not a feasible bike route either. So this is it's steep, but it's a more gradual grade than what South Thomas would be as it approaches South Wakefield.
And I think that we run into a bit of a challenge with this section, right? We've got a triangular section which has the W&D on the south and west sides, and then on the east side we have George Mason Drive, which will have new facilities. Both of those have more moderate grades. And then you've got how we're serving a community in here. There are simply grade challenges we cannot get around with this project.
Mike, you might be on mute. We can't hear you. You're still cutting in and out. Sounds better as you get closer to the.
Mike, it's also possible that your software has switched microphones. I still can't hear you. I'm sorry. Mike, I'm gonna come back to you, Mike. Give you a chance to poke around with your computer. I believe that I said I was going to go to the 571 next, and then the next hand that's up is Mr. Snyder. Caller from 571, and can you, for my benefit, can you just identify yourself one more time, please?
Yes, Linda Dye, representing Douglas Park. I'm the 571 caller tonight.
Thank you, Linda.
Sure. I have a couple of questions about fitting in the bus stops. What consideration or what ideas and basic sketching out have you figured out how to get the current bus stops on Columbia Pike and on George Mason Drive, how to accommodate them in the new schemes?
Hi.
I
was going to say, Rob, do you mind taking this one since it's a transportation planning one?
Do you want to take it?
Certainly. Yeah. So the bus stops are already accounted for as part of the Columbia Pike Forward project. So the efforts that are currently underway that have Columbia Pike kind of in process right now, those are the process that are going to enhance those bus stops. So the Columbia Pike Forward project on Columbia Pike is enhancing the bus stops. Those are what's going to be accommodating the cross section in the future. On George Mason, if there are stops within the development area that have or need improvements, those are things that will be considered, and Rob can follow up on this as those specific part of the form-based code development applications come through.
Okay.
Right.
Sounds great.
And great. I do want to share one thing, is that the county is also looking at either concurrent with this effort or in advance of the development efforts, making improvements to the 4 Mile Run Drive minor bus stop facilities and access.
Excellent. Great. Glad to hear that as well. From my reading, am I assuming correctly that you are also dealing with the east side of George Mason, where you've got a small amount of development, and then we've got Doctors Run Park on the east side, and there are bus stops. I deliberately drove through this afternoon to reconfirm in my mind. There are 3 bus stops on George Mason on the east side from 4 Mile Run north to Columbia Pike. And all they've got is a flag and a piece of sidewalk. So I'm assuming that you are talking about the bus stops on both sides of George Mason Drive. And if that's incorrect, then I'd appreciate being corrected on that.
So for George Mason Drive, anything within the kind of Barcroft area as appropriate for the redevelopment would be addressed. Anything outside of that area, specifically if it's on the east side, would likely be addressed as part of the George Mason redesign process when we integrate the trail. But the bus stops within the project area will be, unless by another project effort that comes through, like Rob mentioned for 4 Mile Run, would be addressed as different developments come through.
Great. Okay. I just want to make sure that we aren't going to lose any of the bus stops on 4 Mile, Columbia Pike, or George Mason. So that sounds great. Okay. Thank you. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dye. Mr. Snyder, you're up, and then Mr. Berkey.
Hey, thank you. Good evening. I'm John Snyder from Columbia Pike Partnership. My question is about slide number 5, in particular 12th Street on the east side of George Mason. And I see on the right side in the street cross-section diagrams, there's a section that is to the east of what I just call the 7-Eleven property, which is on the corner of George Mason and the Pike. And there's a diagram, to designate a street cross-section proceeding east from there. There's not a street there, and there's not a plan to have a street there. It's something that was addressed in the Neighborhoods Form-Based Code when it was adopted, and there was a specific decision to not put a street through the park there. So this is something that I don't know what the origin of the street on this diagram is, but it's not part of the Barcroft property, and it is something that was specifically objected to by the neighborhood at the time that the plan was adopted. So what is the intention there?
So I can speak to that, Kristen, if you like.
Yeah, go for it.
So I believe my reading of the plans was that is an optional street. And I think that does, the optional street is really a pedestrian connection, to be fair to the plans. In this case, what we're doing is we're looking at supporting the Penske site through what has a cross section, but it is effectively it's effectively an alley or driveway that does not go into the park area. The park area is kept sacred or whole, and anything within the park area is planned within park planning processes.
And I'll do a really quick follow-up. 12th Street is on the MTP map to be extended east if that area, the cutback apartments, were to ever redevelopment. It's on the transportation plan map. That's why you see it on this diagram, is because it is part of our adopted policy.
Okay, that's really surprising because it was not to be there as part of the adopted policy of the Neighborhoods Form-Based Code. It was specifically addressed and taken off of that. So it's surprising and disturbing to see it there, because it is, if it were to be built, it would be delivering a lot of traffic directly to the Randolph Elementary School walk zone, which is one of the many reasons why it was not wanted. not seeing any issue with the western portion there that is adjacent to and would be servicing the 7-Eleven parcel when built. That makes perfect sense, but continuing it through the park is something that the neighborhood has been very much against. And if there's anything to be happening on that, the neighborhood really needs to be contacted and addressed directly, because the last we heard of it was in 2012 and it was taken off to not be part of the plan.
I appreciate this comment. We're going to look back at what the plan says. It is not our intention for this effort to amend anything in that area. So it's if this diagram is causing some confusion about what's going on there, I think that it is fair to say that our planning context here is really the Barcroft MFTP area. We have not contemplated the expansion of work product beyond that. There may be some lessons learned from this that go into future stuff, but that is not at this time or place.
And the last thing I'll just mention is this particular slide, if that's what's triggering the questions and concerns. These are merely intended to capture what's currently in the code. You can still see the assemblages of the commercial areas still in place. What you're going to see in 3 weeks is a refinement to those exhibits that consolidate everything into the neighborhoods code. And as both Rob and Kristen mentioned, some additional clarity to the southern end of the Penske site, because that's really where all their parking and loading access has to happen from. We'll find a way to both historically go back to the previous feedback and still make sure there's a suitable outcome for the Penske site.
And I think the other thing that we'll hear about, not only in this effort, but when the Penske project comes forward, whenever that is the feasibility of even connecting two of those links because of topography. So I don't know whether the plan, whether we've misread something in the plan or misrepresented something, but I think that one of the issues we've continued to talk about is how any particularly pedestrian and bike connection would ever be able to get through some of those grades.
Daniel, this is Linda Dye. Can I jump in here?
Sure, and then I'm going to go to Mr. Berkey.
Okay, my understanding, John, from our previous discussions within the form-based code group, is that this, I'm looking right now at slide 21, which is section 4, that the box number 3 east of George Mason, that is not 12th Street, that is an extension of 12th Road, and it's only intended to give access to the area that Gyre Lynch can develop on that southeast corner. So my understanding is that there was no intent to extend 12th Street, and you are absolutely correct. We've certainly discussed this for years through the creation of the neighborhood's form-based code, that 12th Street was not to be continued through to Quincy Street. So again, my understanding is that on slide 21, section 4, that segment of identified as 3 is strictly a section of 12th Road to give access to the area that Gyre Lynch will be redeveloping.
Thanks, Linda. Understood.
Thank you, Ms. Nye, for that. Mr. Berkey, going to you.
I feel quite at home with my fellow Douglas Park neighbors. Hey, everybody. Eric Berkey, representing the Planning Commission, but also live in Douglas Park. So I just want to, I have a question, but I do want to note all the things that I appreciate, because sometimes that gets neglected. I appreciate all the work that's gone into this, both from the staff perspective as well as Jair Lynch. It's great, I think, as maybe Kathy said before, that we're here to implementation. So I just want to highlight that. I'm also, with a lot of the cross sections, I think there's a lot to like, especially from a multimodal perspective. I'm especially thinking about, I think it's section 2, which is 12th Road, Thomas to George Mason. I think that's a nice compromise. I don't know if that's a new addition, but I think the bike path on either side, I think that provides a nice level of access for that stretch. So, cards on the table, what I'm still concerned about is section 1. And I think, I can't remember who, if it was you, Rob, or who in the staff presentation said so, but somebody said that the fire department has said that they need a 26-foot width here. And I'm curious, is that from code, or is that something that the fire department has told staff?
I think it's both. I would say that the fire department is representing their code very vocally. So it's now I would say that this is one of those areas where I think in this process, to be completely transparent, in order to get an implementable set of street sections, we wanted to make sure we were not having an argument with fire. Because in the past, what has happened is when fire didn't get addressed, the build 2 lines were established, and then the build 2 lines were something that couldn't be moved, and fire came in and said they needed more room, and then we started compromising on other spaces. So we took it as a foundational principle to bring fire into this discussion.
Appreciate that. And this is where I think that folks on your side, I think, are put into very tough positions because, frankly, I don't know that we're pushing against maybe some of those firm suggestions when there may be some flexibility in there, because I haven't heard it articulated why 26 feet is essential versus what I've seen 20 feet in the code. I'm not suggesting it should be 20 versus 26, but to me, when we're talking about the ability to provide something like protected bike lanes, which is clearly a safety thing, and it is something that I think it was Mr. Hanna who had mentioned is something that we've gone away from in our transportation planning. It just seems so antithetical to me that we would take that off the table so quickly because one of the other parts of our county has firmly insisted that they are going to be intractable on a certain point. So I sympathize with your position. I suppose my complaint is more to the county manager. I think that this is exactly the type of development where we need to be flexible and think about what's really needed to promote safety from both a fire prevention standpoint as well as an accessibility standpoint, because I don't know anybody who thinks that bike lanes that abut travel lanes is a policy win. They're always blocked by pickup and drop off. People are always getting doored. It's a constant safety issue. It's not something we should be doing. So I appreciate where you all are at, but it's deeply frustrating that we're going to accept something so unsatisfactory. So I don't know. That's not really a question. I guess that's a statement at this point. That's my sentiment. I'm hopeful that maybe we can be a little bit more collaborative with our colleagues in the fire department, because I haven't heard why 26 is so firm. So I'll leave it there, Daniel, and you can go to the next person.
Daniel,
Mr. Hanna, before Ms. Puskar, before we get to you, I'm going to jump in just with chair's privilege before Mr. Hanna as well. Well, actually, Ms. Puskar, you might actually be about to answer a question that I'm going to have. So I'm going to go to you, and then I might to be determined whether I go back to myself.
I just wanted to jump in because it's directly on this point to say, if you are able to get that changed, more power to you. And I say that not lightly. These requirements for the fire access have been applied throughout Arlington County. And we've had numerous conversations trying to get a change, trying to get something that's more urban. And to your point, it has not prevailed. This is what the requirement is. And we've had to make adjustments, I think, on every project I can think of in the recent past. And staff, what they're saying is the case. There is no there. I just don't want to leave the impression that there is something that can be done, because the fire marshal and kind of the health and safety and fire access has outweighed all other considerations in pretty much every project I can think of in the recent past, unfortunately, or for better or worse. People are safe, I guess.
Well, so thank you, Ms. Puskar. Where I would like to see us put some mental energy into is there a way to get the 26? Is there a way to get this whole 81 feet while getting 26 clear width? What can be reduced to 5? What can be reduced to 3? Is there a way to go down to 3 in the building zone? Is there a way to go down to 5 in the tree zone? Is there a way to do a 2-foot median, an unbuilt median that gets us to 26? But that's a plan B. I mean, I want to, for staff's benefit, and I don't need an answer tonight. I actually don't even know that I want an answer tonight, but definitely when it comes to the commissions, I kind of want the A to B to C to Z on how we're at 26 feet. I also read the Virginia Fire Code to require 20 feet. I'm mindful of the fact that in different zones than this, but I'm mindful of the fact that in 2021, the Fire Code was amended specifically to reduce the minimum width in townhouse districts and single family to 18 feet, specifically to avoid these kinds of conflicts. And I'm mindful of the fact that when you've got an unprotected bike lane, you're creating, this is an environment where on-street parking was a particular concern to existing residents that's come up over and over and over again. And putting that on-street bike lane there is creating a whole additional kind of vehicular conflict between people who are getting into the driver's side of their cars. Not just the bikes, but the cars that are parking there. I mean, it's really it's a messy situation. I agree with Mr. Berkey's comments. I want that ABC, not because I disbelieve staff. I don't disbelieve that you're repeating what the fire department is told. I want that record because I want to be able to go to the county board and the county and say it is time to hold. It is time to it is time. We have policy that exists to reduce the number of emergency calls to these sites, and you are forcing us to build travel lanes that increase the likely number of emergency calls to these sites. And stop it. And I want to be able to at Planning Commission to be on the record about why this requirement is bass backwards as I think it is in the light of other adopted policy. So hopefully we can hear more about that. Mr. Hanna, I hope I didn't steal your thunder, but I'm going to go to you and then to Mr. Gibson.
Okay, can you guys hear me now? Change technology.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to, ditto everything we just said in the last 5 minutes. I'm going to move on back over to the east side of George Mason again. So yeah, I was confused by that road section, but I think I understand, and I want some clarity here. So the road section shown as section 3 is an access road for whatever they're going to build over there. On the previous slide, it showed a bike facility in that same place. So the access road has no bike facility at all, which was confusing. So what I think you're saying, what I think I hear you saying is, there's a separate bike path or bike facility being planned that will parallel that road and will connect the actual 12th Street Bike Boulevard to Quincy. Is that what I'm to understand from the previous slide?
So there's a couple things to understand in slide 3. First of all, sorry, yeah. not section 3, not slide 3. Sorry.
Those slide 3 is also germane to the conversation, so I'd like to go back to that too, but go ahead.
So section 3 shows a typical section with development on both sides of the street. So it shows sort of that parking lane, the sidewalk, and the building zone. Adjacent to the park, we would treat that as an undeveloped site, and the code has language on how to deal with that. And in that case, you wouldn't see the parking lane, you wouldn't see the sidewalk per se, and you wouldn't see the building zone. Those would all be within the park. What we are saying about the bike connection is that the bike connection principally is something that's gonna have to happen within the park. We don't see any way around this issue. There is a bike connection today that the improvements on George Mason will help facilitate connection to. But as Doctors Runs Park gets built, it is, I think we recognize that the park planning process will have to address community goals for connectivity and access to the park, and circulation within, while balancing any natural resource goals. I think that's a long-winded way to say we're going to have to work with DPR and the park design to get some of, if you want specific connections delivered in the park.
Okay, so there's no, even though slide, what slide am I on? 16 calls out proposed Barcroft bike lane or facility, that is really nothing that's being proposed by this plan. That's something that maybe someday somebody might build it, but you guys aren't going to do it. This developer's not going to do it, and the county doesn't have any current plans to do it, is what I'm hearing you saying.
I would say that the developer is not going to, the Barcroft plan, MFDP is not going to do it.
Right.
And the county would do it through the DPR planning process.
Okay. So as far as this development plan is concerned, then the 12th Street Boulevard, I mean, you're proposing really a state-of-the-art facility on 12th Road between George Mason and Thomas. I think everyone's very excited about that section, but it's kind of dangling out there with no connection on decent connection on either side. And so, but the proposal would be that if the 12th Boulevard connection would be on the existing bike path through the park, down to the existing Hawk intersection, across George Mason, and then back up the sidewalk.
No. Let me short circuit you, or have.
Just make it. Walk me through what the 12th Street Boulevard connection is.
Rob, do you want me to just take this from a high level planning perspective?
Please.
So I think it's important to remember that this is all we need to take a step back, and this is not going to be built tomorrow. All of this is a long range. This is what we're proposing as part of what gets built as this area redevelops, what Barcroft is responsible for implementing. It will take time. This is what the context will look like on Barcroft. This is what the Barcroft development is responsible for. They are not responsible for the recommendations outside of their purview. The recommendations for the 12th Street Bike Boulevard outside of this development area still stand. They are recommendations that exist in the transportation plan. Those are still valid. It is more, this is what this plan is responsible for when these sites happen to develop. We do not know the timing. I am sure J.R. Lynch would never commit to a timeline for some of these implementations because this is more the vision. We plan for these cross sections if and when these sites redevelop. This is what we're looking at. The larger picture still exists around them. This is just the context that this site provides. 12th Street still happens outside of this area in the transportation plan. So I think it's really important to remember none of this is getting built tomorrow. This is just the more fine-grained detail of how the 12th Street Boulevard vision will be implemented at Barcroft. Because the land use context is changing, we wanted to make sure that we knew that there was going to be a safe facility, a comfortable facility for people who are biking through the site. Everything outside of the site will happen if and when those sites develop. So that's kind of the bigger picture context and how it relates to Barcroft specifically.
And I'm going to add on sort of the drilling down further perspective. What we're looking at today are the typical cross sections that would go into the code. We envision that during the use permit approval process for each individual development, we would take a detailed look at some of the very important connection details associated with delivering the bike facilities, pedestrian facilities, and all transportation facilities. We are anticipating that 12th Road would likely be signalized in the future, and that would provide a safe crossing for peds and bicyclists from the Barcroft, the northern portion of Barcroft, through to Doctor's Run and any of the multimodal facilities on the east side of George Mason Drive. Does that help?
Yeah, it helps some. Yeah. Okay. So you're just building these facilities. I still have concerns. We raised them earlier that would, whatever the timing is, there's not a safe crossing to these bike facilities. But what you're saying is at some point in the future, you anticipate the county will create a safe crossing to this bike facility.
I would say it would not be, there would not be a gap. It would likely be concurrent with the development plans that deliver these facilities.
Okay. All right. And then just unrelated, while I've got the floor here, the on-street cycle track on 4 Mile Run Minor. It looks like that really is intended just to get you from Wakefield to where you can get onto the WNOD, and it's not doing anything else besides that. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, we did not propose a parallel bike facility to the WOND.
Okay, so that's just that short section. And is there a proposal for a safe way to get across into that bike facility, into that on-street cycle track, since you're basically just coming down the hill, crossing and going into that? Is that going to be a signalized or somehow some kind of signage at that intersection?
I would guarantee that when those plans come through, that would be a very high level, like a very high priority concern to be addressed.
Okay.
I can't give you the answer of what it would be right now, but it would be a priority when we get to that point.
I would like to move on to Mr. Hanna. If there's nothing else, I'd like to move on to Mr. Muratovich and then Mr. Benson.
And I unmuted too, so I just want
my apologies. I having just called on Mr. Muratovich, I'm going to come to you after that and then go to Mr. Benson. Thank you for speaking up.
Well, but I also wanted to say, so that you see it, that the phone says ECNV, which is where I work, so it doesn't say my name.
I'm happy to wait while the lady's already talking.
I want to let you go, but just so long. I just wanted to make sure he knew I was here, because I know that this says ECNV and he might have passed over it or something.
No, thank you. I am grateful for you mentioning it. This kind of thing is exactly why I forecasted at the beginning that I might miss that you had gone off mute. So thank you for speaking up. And we'll get to you next.
Okay, thank you. I'm Aydin Muratovich, transportation here with the Transportation Commission. I'd like to echo a lot of the concerns. Very frustrating situation with the fire requirements that we're basically having to design our urban environment around these oversized fire trucks rather than the trucks being designed around our environment. It's not an issue other countries have. I mean, frankly, if you take a look at all of these sections, they would be so much better without that requirement. So it's hard to find one that you would design that way as they are now. If that wasn't the case, for example, Section 7, you have 13-foot lanes, which is wider than on an interstate. It's kind of an absurdity, but I don't want to beat a dead horse. It gives us very little room to maneuver on a transportation perspective. So what flexibility do we have on the building zones for the doors? Some of them are 4 feet. Could they be 3.5 feet, 3 feet? Someone else has already asked that question earlier, but I don't remember it here being answered.
So I think what you're alluding to is Chair Weir's question, and I think I didn't get a chance to answer it, which was what I heard was a request for more discussion about providing protected bike facilities on the segments shown with on-street bike lanes to provide a little bit more thought and the impacts that type of facility would cause would have on the cross section. So how wide would it get? What constraints would that create? I think that we didn't say this at the beginning. We've put a lot of thought into this, but we haven't closed the door on addressing feedback in this process. So we intend to take these comments back and provide responses. So we'll look at if there's a way to address providing protected facilities, at least on the segments that are not constrained by pinch points. And how that might be impacted by those pinch points. And then we can provide a little bit more detail on the section of the code that the fire marshal is looking at for their requirements to provide it. I think what we've identified, or what I know is what I think is the case, is that the fire marshal is specifically referencing the code requirements for aerial fire access. So when the buildings exceed a certain height and aerial apparatus need to be brought to bear to address emergency situations. So in those cases, I know they have rigors that extend beyond a pretty substantial distance, and those need to be deployed in order to safely operate that equipment. We'll provide the letter and code for that information.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Thank you, Mr. Mirotovich. Is that all you have, Mr. Mirotovich?
No, I got so basically we don't know yet how much flexibility there might be on the 4-foot building zone. Did I understand that correctly?
So what I was understanding was a look at the whole cross section and see how we could do it.
Okay.
Not just the 4-foot building zone, and we understand that the 4-foot building zone may be an area that is more flexible than others in people's opinion.
Yeah, I mean, also kind of in that spirit of looking at how things can be expanded, reduced, Section 6 potentially, because that doesn't look like one of the streets that the fire department is asking for 26 feet on. It's perhaps we could move the travel lanes down to 10 feet each, and then expand the bike lane to allow for passing, and up to 6 feet in both lanes. So I think that space would increase safety more over by having wider bike lanes than wider travel lanes. So, but in general, it's along the same spirit of kind of reworking the sections.
Yeah, what I will say about this one is we do continue to see buses operating along 4 Mile Run Minor. Okay. I think that we have heard that there are the 4 Mile Run Minor is a very constrained road today.
Okay.
That said, I think that your point, we can talk about how we can look into how the travel lanes could be adjusted if that's appropriate.
All right, great. I mean, in general, I know we've been focusing on the negatives. There are positives with this an increase in block porosity, per the MTP. So I don't want to bash out everything. And I know the things that we are kind of being negative on is mostly due to the fire department requirements, because they frankly have an equipment issue. Their equipment is not adequate to function on a normal urban street. I know there was discussion earlier regarding the Penske side and potential pedestrian access going up to Quincy. I think the consensus is that's not going to be a road for vehicular transportation. That might be an opportunity to adopt what they've been doing in Paris with these closed streets that only allow for pedestrian and cycle traffic around school zones, and that are very kid friendly. So that might be a way to increase block porosity, continue that 12th Street without putting a vehicle on it, and with the request of the neighborhood there. But that's further down the road.
Thank you, Mr. Maranovich.
Thank you all.
Ms. Ray, I want to go to you, and then to you, Mr. Benson. And at this point, I want to ask, I think the answer is no, but do we have anyone here who is here to provide public comment? If you are aiming to provide public comment, I'm going to ask you to indicate as much in the chat. That is an appropriate use of the chat to sign up for that. Ms. Van Hine, I just saw your hand go up, but I'm going to go again to Ms. Ray and then to Mr. Benson.
Okay, since I haven't been following this for some time, I may ask some questions that are for my clarification. So, did I understand that this area that we're now talking about of the property and the facilities surrounding it, etc., like park and all that, that this is going to be near the new high-rise apartment building and also the community center, or not? I mean, are there going to be streets that will connect into the property directly to those facilities? Did you hear me? Hello?
We can hear you.
Oh.
I think
okay.
We're seeing who can answer this one. This one might have to be I'm going to kick this back to Olivia and Matt to potentially answer.
Hi, Linda. Do you mind repeating the question and pointing us to a slide? We can't hear you if you're talking. You might have to unmute yourself.
I thought I was unmuted.
You are now. We can hear you.
Okay. So I don't know what was happening because I didn't do anything to it except move the phone a little. So what I was asking is in this area where the sidewalks and bus stops and intersections, is this like the nearest entrance into the property where the new building is going to be and the community center? Okay, I'm asking this question because my understanding is also that the rental office is going to be placed up with that new building complex and the community center and all of that. And are you still hearing me? Because I'm not sure.
Yes, we are. And I don't
Okay.
know that we know yet where those facilities are going to be located, but if someone from the Gyre Lynch team has a response, feel free to jump in.
I don't have a response to that question specifically, no.
Okay. Well, this is the reason for asking. If I'm either a resident of that particular building, which will have a lot of residents, right? And if that is where the rental office is located, either there or in the community center, and in the community center, which is a common area, then the Fair Housing Act would require that there be an accessible route of travel for pedestrians who could be wheelchair users as well, or people using mobility devices from those facilities like a community center or a big building like that to the nearest public transit stop, which would be buses, right, on Columbia Pike and or George Mason. And it would also cross you over apparently to the commercial facilities, like right now, the 7-Eleven building or anything, whatever goes there. Okay, so that's something that, you know, the developer is going to have to think about how people with disabilities, both people with physical disabilities and people who are blind, for example, like me, are going to navigate those streets, whether they're going to have curb ramps and that there are pedestrian rights of way leading to accessible bus stops. And so I'm suggesting that I think there's a joint concern, and there should be a policy that addresses it if necessary in terms of the form-based code to make sure that those sidewalks, including the public sidewalks off the property, but also, you know, in going into the property, and are wide enough and accessible. If they're accessible, if there are traffic lights that will cross you over, they should be accessible, including accessible to people who are blind, for example, and hearing impaired, as well as accessible to wheelchair users. And in future development, prepare the way so that people can use public and private facilities leading from public transit. And so I'm wondering how that's being taken into account, as well as making sure that there aren't conflicts with bicycle lanes. But on the other hand, I'm also interested in hearing if they're going to be bicycle lanes, whether they are going to be wide enough to accommodate an adapted bicycle that many people who use wheelchairs use, because they're a little bit wider than your regular bicycle. And then the other thing is that I'm concerned about walkways and pathways within the housing complex itself, connecting various facilities there and various buildings there. You know, I know that certain residents who lived over there when this came through the Housing Commission and in other, I think, input sessions, were concerned that if they have their apartments renovated, which now they've already adapted for themselves, will there be sidewalks within the complex so that they can get up to where they have to pay their rent, up to use the community center and all of that. So those are the kinds of concerns, because that's all I can express right now, and I haven't seen the maps and other drawings. So I think it's very important to take those things into account in making decisions also about what kind of facilities you're going to put in, how wide the sidewalks are, and other things related to the bike lanes as well. I mean, because if somebody is going to have to cross over a bike lane to get to the other side of Columbia Pike or the other side of George Mason to get on a bus to go to their job or wherever they're going, you have to take that into consideration in that neighborhood just as much as you have to take it into consideration down in Courthouse, where it's and other places that are more urban that are and commercial that is a problem right now. So I just wanted to put that forth, because if there were ever any bus stops in that neighborhood where they were going to think about putting in a floating bus stop, that's going to make a problem too. So that's what I wanted to bring in my time here filling in on these topics.
Thank you for the comments, and I can say that when we get to the final designs of each new building and then the associated public sidewalks, streets, and other facilities, we do integrate reviews for compliance, for ADAG compliance. That's an area that we're strongly committed to. And while we're talking about cross sections at this point in time, I'm sure that the final design review will include those reviews and ensure these facilities are accessible and safe for all users.
But the public sidewalks, once you get off of the public sidewalks in that neighborhood are certainly narrower. They need to be at least wide enough to accommodate two power chairs passing each other and maneuverability to turn. And the question is, can that area, now that we have this opportunity and all this development and changes going on, even in the public transit network up and down the Pike and across streets like George Mason that take you around to Bailey's and et cetera, we need, as the disability community, improvements in the access from what we have now, for sure. So the transportation people, I hope, will be taking that into account, and the building the pedestrian and vehicle infrastructure and intersection.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of the sidewalks shown in the cross sections are either 6 feet wide or 8 feet wide to provide that maneuverability you talk of.
Well, 6 feet wide seems like a little bit. It's the clear space is 6 feet, or would it include, for example, planters and stuff like?
No, it would be the clear sidewalks.
Yeah, because down here in Crystal City, like right in front of the building that I'm sitting in right now, if the only place for a vehicle like a taxi cab or a Metro Access or a Star vehicle to pull up, let alone I don't think going by the front of this building we have any bus stops on this side at any rate. But there are planters that go right almost up to the curve, save maybe, just maybe 36 inches, and you can't, so your paratransit vehicle is letting down its lift, and there's not even room to alight from it, because the way the planter is constructed, there's a step right in the middle of the planter, and you can't turn around, you can't turn left or right when you're alighting from a paratransit vehicle. And that's the only place they can pull up, because it's a protected bike lane. So
Ms. Ray, I think
Okay.
we appreciate the feedback. If there's nothing else, if there isn't anything else, I think
you're give time to do that.
Yeah, in the interest of time, I want to go to Mr. Benson. Ms. Poskar, your hand is still up. I will call on you if there's I'm sorry to keep both of you waiting if there's another issue, and then if there's nothing after that, for those in the chat, Ms. Van Hine has indicated that she would like to speak as a public commenter. Our rule is that we have one person here per represented entity, and as she has noted, Mr. Hanna has already spoken on behalf of BAC. So that's just to keep everyone on the same page. Mr. Benson.
Thank you. My name is Bob Benson. I'm here representing the Forestry and Natural Resources Commission. I have a comment or a question and comment that may be a little bit contrary to some of the comments that I've heard so far this evening, but I want to just get them out there and get them on the record. I want to start by just providing the context that I'm a bike rider. I've biked all over Arlington. I've biked countless times down the W&OD trail past Barcroft. And in looking at the development and trying to come up with comments on behalf of my commission, I've walked the Barcroft site. So I'm kind of familiar with the topography and the access to the bike trail that now exists. So I hope that the comments I'm going to make are taken with that in context. I appreciate that the plan shows a wider tree zones for the trees along these streets. That's important, and we appreciate that. One thing that I'll note is that in FNRC's comments on earlier meetings about the plan, one of the things we said was, quote, reimagine 12th Street, 12th Road is a grand tree-lined boulevard. I think the plan is very much moving in that direction. We appreciate that. But I think where we're coming from as a commission is that we hope that trees are not the afterthought here, and they don't appear to be, and we're appreciating that. And I want to mention that the Forestry and Natural Resources Plan is one of the 12 parts of the Arlington's comprehensive plan. And in that sense, it's equivalent to all the other elements of the plan, including the transportation plan. So the comment I'm about to make is recognizing that often in Arlington, we face a creative tension between things like conserving or enhancing green space, which we need, and providing things like bike lanes. And so I guess that's all a lead up to a comment that I want to ask, why do we need bike lanes within the bounds of the Barcroft community? Because we have major bike lane access along both the George Mason side, we will on the George Mason side, and definitely on the 4 Mile Run side. And as a biker, I ride or walk my bike on neighborhood streets all the time to get to bike lanes. And it seems to me like the residents of Barcroft have relatively easy access. They could walk their bikes down to the 4 Mile Run bike trail, for example. So I'm asking that in the context of, we're talking a lot about how wide the bike lanes need to be and all of that. And I guess I want to be on the record as saying there are other interests that we have to consider as well, like the lady who was just talking. We want to have wide enough sidewalks to allow for all sorts of citizens who are going to live there to be able to get out and about safely. And we need to have those citizens have very healthy tree-lined streets that will benefit the community in a myriad of ways that I'm not going to get into here, but we all know how much trees are a benefit to Arlingtonians, and Arlingtonians who live in Barcroft now, and Arlingtonians who will live there in the high rises that will be built. So I guess I'd like to kind of put the general question out there. Given that there's fairly good access to existing bike lanes already, why do we need to put down asphalt and create additional bike lanes within the community itself?
So I'll take this one from a MTP perspective and an existing plan perspective. Columbia Pike recognizes, the Columbia Pike planning processes have recognized the need for a parallel path to Columbia Pike. That was recommended on 11th. 11th is going to happen. So we've done that in 12th. 12th, we know is going to carry a lot of people, and we want to make sure people have safe spaces to bike within Barcroft, not just along the perimeter, but through Barcroft. In that process, we have made sure that our tree pits in these cross sections are adequate to provide safe and comfortable spaces for our trees to grow. We've worked with our colleagues in the urban forestry department to make sure that these tree pits satisfy the need to make sure we can have a viable tree canopy in 20 years. But we want to make sure that people can safely bike too. So on 12th, on South Wakefield, where our bike lanes are recommended within the site, we have those tree pits that meet our minimum standards. They exceed the standards that are previously adopted within different codes. And we want to make sure that people can bike safely, not just around the site, but through the site, because people are going to be living here.
Understood. I bike safely through neighborhoods that don't have bike lanes to get to bike trails. So we can't have a bike trail on every single street in Arlington. I guess I appreciate the fact that you're working with the urban forestry folks with DPR to make sure that there's good tree, good foundations for the trees to become canopy trees. And in fact, I'm not really saying we shouldn't have bike trails within there. I'm just kind of saying, people, it's not that far to walk from 12th Road down to George Mason, walk your bike safely down there on a wide sidewalk, walk on a boulevard, and then get on the bike trail there. And there's lots of other residents within the community who won't be bikers, who will want to be able to stroll and have a beautiful tree-lined boulevards in which to recreate and just enjoy their community. So I guess there is a creative tension. I still want to be on the record that if anything, I would not want the street tree zones to be diminished in the interest of creating better bike lanes. If you're going to look for extra feet for things, look elsewhere, because I think having a lot of green space is going to be very important for the health and well-being of the people who are going to be living there in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. Ms. Pascara, your hand is still up. If there's something that I'm going to recognize you, and then next we're going to go back to Mr. Maradovich. And this is going to be last call for anyone to raise their hand to weigh in, because we're going to go to public comment after Mr. Maradovich.
Okay, I'll be quick, but I'm circling back, unfortunately, to the fire marshal. One thing I wanted to clarify, and I think Rob hit on it, is it's an aerial access requirement, but I also wanted to confirm that aerial access makes it sound like it should be like a high rise or something, but I think I was told by the architects, I may get this number wrong, but it's anything that's greater than, I think it's like 35 feet in height. Requires that aerial access. And I also wanted to make sure that you didn't think I was being flippant when I said, more power to you. We seriously mean that. If you can achieve something different than we've been able to achieve on multiple projects, it is a conflict with some of the urban situations we're trying to create, it does have an impact. And I didn't want you to walk away thinking that I don't agree with you or support that concept. It's just that we have discussed it on multiple projects and made adjustments to multiple projects to address those concerns. Thank you.
Well, for what it's worth, that is not what I took away from it. I took the comment as being in earnest, and as you just as you clarified, this body does not take votes and make recommendations. But I don't want to speak for Mr. Berkey, who is here in his as the representative of the Planning Commission, but it is within the purview of the Planning Commission to make findings and recommendations. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is something that catches the interest of my colleagues on that body when it comes to it.
Hey Kathy, it's Eric. No offense taken. That was not how I so appreciate you saying that, but we're all good. I always appreciate your thoughts and I take them wholeheartedly, and I just so appreciate your sentiment. But no worries, we're good. Thanks.
I'm going to go to Mr. Maradovich, and then I'm going to go to public comment. I believe Ms. Van Hine is our only commenter. Mr. Maradovich, did we lose you?
You're muted.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you. Mr. Benson raised some good points and about the tension that does exist with limited street space. He said, we can't have a bike lane on every single street, and I agree with that. But we are far, far from that in Arlington. We have fragments of a network, but I kind of reject the notion that there is this tension between tree canopy and bike lanes. There's a tension between why it is that with bike lanes, why isn't it with parking spaces? Why isn't it with travel lanes? And just because someone is able to walk their bike or ride a bike down an unprotected a road without an unprotected bike lane doesn't mean other people are comfortable with that or willing to do it. So I'd like to move away from this anecdotal approach to a fact-based, data-driven approach. And all of that states that in order to have safety, in order to have higher usage, you need a network. And if you want to make an environmental argument about something, then go for the parking space, go for the cars. To have this kind of take away from cyclists, especially when there's a school so nearby, that to have children biking down a road that doesn't have a protected bike lane, or to ask them to get on a sidewalk and then get off a sidewalk. And then we have the other accessibility concerns of people using potentially mobility scooters. I just think it's a false tension, and I'm glad that Mr. Benston feels so comfortable biking around all over Arlington. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of people don't. So I support the staff's efforts in creating a parallel network to Columbia Pike, because unfortunately we can't have a bike lane down Columbia Pike due to the narrowness of that road. So thank you.
Could I just make a quick
Mr.
comment?
Benson, I see that you're not on mute. I actually am not inclined to go more than go. A question and point has been made, a response and counterpoint has been given in response to the question. And in the interest of time, and because I believe we're well over time, I'm not inclined to invite a back and forth. I do want to go to.
I was going to agree with much of what he said.
Mr. Benson, I am not inclined to invite a back and forth, but thank you for your contributions. I'm going to check in with Ms. Sontag and find out whether or not there's anything else for the good of the order that needs to be gone over or addressed, and then going to go to Ms. Van Hine.
Nope, I think we can go to Ms. Van Hine, and then we can just remind everybody about the next meeting after public comment.
Thank you. Ms. Van Hine, are you still with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Oh, there's my camera too. I'll try to be quick, and I was trying to follow the rules, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I am the pedestrian in the group. I am the recording secretary for the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and I am the backup representative to Mike Hanna, who's on the Bicycle Advisory Committee, and he was speaking tonight. The first thing I want to say is, yes, we need to reconsider some of these intersections, cross sections, especially the first one, which is really scary. And my first comment about that is it is against Vision Zero principles to be building something that is possibly that dangerous. And we really need to support bike networks. As a pedestrian, I am a strong supporter both of separate safe bike facilities and trees, and I don't want to fight about it. I want all of us to have the space that we need. And if you can find more space, if you can take some more space from the shy zone, that would be great. Otherwise, we need to figure out something different in that space. But don't take away from the sidewalks, don't take away from the landscaping zone, and certainly figure out what you can do to make the bike lanes safer in general. A couple clarifying questions. But you talked about the importance of PUDO. Are you going to use all these parking spaces all over the place? Some of those will be dedicated PUDO spaces. That's one question. And the current sidewalk on the Barcroft side of Columbia Pike is really super wide. And in your plans for Columbia Pike, which is what street section 4, it is much narrower for the clear zone. And I'm wondering why it is so much narrower than the existing space. And is that because of the new buildings that are going to be going along there? And what happens to this very tall retaining wall that I think goes from like Wakefield to Thomas, which seems to be critically supporting things? I also want to verify that when you're talking about the section 7, which is the bit of improved sidewalks between Wakefield and Thomas, it's not going to go beyond Thomas, and that is because there's not going to be new buildings over there, and also because you have major retaining walls over there. And I will say that I find that unfortunate because that is a very sad section of sidewalk over there. I am very happy that you do have 6-foot minimum clear zones and 8-foot minimum clear zones on the site. And I hope that in the internal sections for the older buildings that we're not talking about, that you will still have the adequate dimensions that the back and pack have promoted in our earlier responses. I think that's it for now. I may send you some additional comments because I spent a lot of time preparing for this, and I had a lot of questions, but a lot of them were answered. This was a really good discussion, and I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Van Heinen. I expect that staff will be ready with answers to those either in direct follow-up or at our next meeting.
Yeah, I can't come to the next meeting. It's the same time as the pack.
We will make sure that the questions are answered on the record, and we will also, even if it's just me following up directly with you, we will also make sure that they're brought to your direct attention.
I thought this was a great meeting. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Ms. Sante, can you close us out? And thank you everyone for your patience and indulgence this evening.
Yes, no problem. We really appreciate the discussion. I think we have a lot of work to do behind the scenes before the next meeting. We'll be meeting on Wednesday, November 13th. We did distribute meeting invites for this one already, but you can anticipate seeing meeting materials sent out the Friday prior to that next meeting. And I think that's everything from staff.
Thank you. Then unless there's anything else for the good of the order, I am going to bid everyone good evening, good night. We will see you on the 13th. And this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thank you.